The lighting's not the greatest. All right, we're live now, I think. All right, I think we're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. As you can see, I have a special guest. My husband, Pastor Tommy McMurtry. Hi, Karen. Hi, Amber, Celine, and Ashley. Nice to see you guys. Sorry, it's a little shadowy. That's okay. We're trying to squeeze both of us in here, so hopefully it'll work. All right, we're just going to kind of wing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have no outline.
I thought you wrote some notes.
No, I didn't.
Uh-oh.
We're going to wing it. We were just talking earlier. We went out to lunch, and we were just talking about show ideas and stuff, and we kind of came up with this off the top of our head. So
I thought you were writing down all those points I was giving you.
I was not. No.
I'm not going to remember them.
Just do your best. Just try. Just
see what happens.
We'll see what happens. Okay. So we wanted to talk about, first of all, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. I noticed there's like 20, there was 20 people and like 2 likes. So go ahead and like it. That helps the YouTube algorithm and all that good stuff. So get that out of the way first. If you want to get text, go ahead and text Gently Led, all one word, lowercase, to 31996. I have almost 100 people signed up for that, and I pay for it monthly, so I want everyone to use it. I want everyone to use it as much as they can. So, but let's get into this. Okay, first of all, how long have you been in the ministry life?
I was born in it. It's my whole life, so it's all I know. Grew up in a pastor's home and was officially on staff at my last church when I was 20, and that was when I was officially staff. I was always doing stuff, but I actually got a title when I was 20. I didn't get ordained until a few years later, but and then started pastoring when I was 30. So it's pretty much all I know. So basically, we're gonna probably tell a lot of stories tonight about pastors' families. No names will be mentioned. And it doesn't matter anyway, because most of you would probably not know the names.
You guys don't want to know.
You wouldn't know most of these people, but so just kind of sharing some experience tonight, because I had a lot of experiences.
And mainly people that like you saw growing up.
Right.
So it's not like people that you've known since being in the, well, some of them are since being in the ministry, but not related to anyone. No one would know.
This audience probably would never know who I was talking about, so don't try to figure it out.
Yeah, it's not anyone you would know. So we know a lot of people. We know a lot of people in the Baptist world, and most of these are in the Baptist world.
Mm-hmm.
So we know a lot of people in the Baptist world, and it's no one you guys would know. So someone asked, are you ready for labor? I know he said it was hard.
Oh, am I ready for labor? Absolutely not. No, especially after what you found out at the doctor today and what I got to deal with at the doctor. But apparently I have to go in and I'm not allowed to leave. Mm-hmm. Otherwise I can't come back but we'll see. I've been breaking every rule, every place, and hardly anybody says anything. And so I'm just going to try to see if I can get away with stuff at the hospital.
I think they're a little more strict there.
But speaking of doctors and things, be praying for my guitar and her flute. We took them in to get repairs, and they told us they have to keep them in for 3 to 5 days of isolation before they can work on them. So it sounds pretty serious.
Yeah, even the instruments are being treated like they have COVID now.
Yeah, so pray nobody gets COVID from my guitar. It could be sick because it didn't have any symptoms of COVID, but that could be one of the symptoms. Just might be asymptomatic.
Oh, look, see, Shara said Sean couldn't leave either. And that's what they told Austin and Janae.
Did he try to break the rules?
He's always pushing the limit.
Yeah, I push everything. You'd be surprised what I get away with.
Yeah.
I got in the hospital to visit somebody before they were letting pastors in the hospital to visit people.
He did.
And I didn't sneak in. I just talked him into it. So
maybe he can pull his pastor's card out with this baby. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But no, he's not ready for labor and delivery at all.
I'll dress up like a doctor.
Okay.
It was walk in and out like I own the place.
Okay. Oh, and look, Sarah said Aaron was allowed to leave, but you were at a birth center. I guess they're a little more picky.
Our hospital's pretty laid back. I think I'll be able to get away with stuff.
We'll see. I'll keep you updated and let you know. They just scanned his forehead when they came back.
Yeah, they're not going to be picky.
I was in America, though.
Yeah.
You were in Iowa, you
Yeah.
mean? Yeah. That's funny. Okay, so we'll get into the topic now that we've talked about that. Yeah, pray for me over the next coming few weeks. Hopefully she comes in the next few weeks, and she is still a girl. We found out we had another ultrasound today, measuring big, and she's breached, so pray for her to flip, because I really don't want a C-section. So I have only been in the ministry. Well, I was raised in church. So even though I wasn't technically like in a pastor's family, we were always pretty involved in church. That's the extent of you. But growing up, that was always my heart's desire, to be at church, be in church. And I wanted to actually marry a pastor, marry a missionary, marry someone in full-time service. So I know a lot of people look down on that and they say women shouldn't want that, but I don't know. How do you feel about that? Do you think that's an okay goal to have?
I mean, I think it's okay to want it. I think it's kind of weird sometimes when women start talking about their call to marry a pastor and things like that. I mean, and then they're like shooting down good guys.
Yeah. I didn't shoot any
because
good guys down before you.
Just because of that. Because at the end of the day, the last thing you want is some guy deciding he wants to be a preacher because he just wants to marry you that bad.
Yeah.
And the guy's supposed to lead anyway. And so you never know. Some guys, they don't decide to get in the ministry until they've been married several years. I know a lot of pastors that were married for a long time and before they decide they want to be in the ministry. Now, I do think the sooner you know, the better. I think it's good if you can, warn your potential wife and let her know what she's in for. If you know that's what you want to do before you're married, but at the same time, if it is something somebody decides to do after they get married, I think the wife should follow. But just because a woman should do something doesn't mean that she will all the time. And so, guys, don't just assume because you've got the wives submit yourselves to your husband verse. Think you're just going to be able to lay that card down and then all of a sudden she's going to follow you. She might not. Hopefully she does, but she might not.
I want to talk about that too a little bit, because we've seen that happen a lot where the woman marries the guy, not really expecting that life or that lifestyle. And then 5 or 6 years into it, he decides he wants to be a pastor and she does not want anything to do with it.
Right. And I guess that would be a good kind of first point to talk about when preparing your family for the ministry is letting them know what they're in for. Now, the thing is, I don't think anybody totally knows what they're in for when they decide to go in the ministry. I think I did. Growing up in a pastor's home, I had a pretty good idea. I had a pretty good idea of what I was in for. And I'm not going to lie. I really haven't been that surprised by anything.
You weren't.
With all the crazy stuff I've seen over the years, nothing has surprised me. But a lot of people do get surprised if they're not familiar with that world, if they don't have a whole lot of experience just being around that. And so it is, but the more you can prepare them, the better. And husbands, if you decide to, when you tell your wife, hey, I want to be a pastor someday and I want to go into the ministry, that's not necessarily an easy thing you're asking of her. And I think it's a really bad attitude. And I don't think it helps your cause when you're just like, I'm the man, do it. No, you need to give honor to the wife as unto the weaker vessel. And you need to understand that what you are going to endure, you might be able to handle it, but you need to consider whether or not your wife's able to handle it. Because if she can't handle it and she flops out and she gives up, you're done anyway.
Yeah.
So you better do whatever you can do to prepare her. Do whatever you can do to prepare your kids and prep them for it. Obviously, kids don't run the home, but fathers, we're not supposed to provoke our children to wrath. We don't want to destroy our kids. We don't want to ruin them. So you need to, always kind of keep them a priority and do whatever you can do to, prepare them for what they're in for, because it's not always going to be an easy thing for the kids too. And, there's a lot of good things about being in the ministry and being a pastor.
Yeah, I want to cover those later.
Yeah, there's a lot of good things, but there's some bad things too. And a lot of times I think people go into it, thinking about all the good things. And so there's a lot of excitement at first, and maybe even the wife and kids are excited because they know about the good stuff, but then all of a sudden the bad stuff comes and then they're just like, I wasn't expecting this. And so anything you can do to prepare them, I think, is important. And and if you've never pastored, if you didn't grow up in a pastor's home, there's only so much you're going to know. But that's where you want to talk to some experienced pastors, guys that have been in it for a long time. Hopefully your sending pastor, he's probably going to know a few things, and hopefully he'll prepare you for it. And anybody that I've ever talked to about going into the ministry, potentially ordaining or anything like that, I always talk to the wife there. I'll point blank ask her right there for the husband, what do you think about this? And if it's something they're not real enthused about, then or act like they don't want to do, I tell them, man, you gotta get them on board. You have to have their support. You have to have their help. Otherwise, you're gonna crash and burn.
Is that why you wanted to marry someone that was tough as nails?
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it was because I liked you too, but it does help that, yeah. And one thing I always tell, the guys too that I'm training in our church, not every woman is like my wife, and, a pastor's wife is not even really a thing. No. It's just my wife. And so if you, have married a completely different personality, I don't think she necessarily has to try to be something that she's not. You just need to remember that that's your wife, and you got to take care of her. And she might not be able to, do a lot of the things that my wife does, that helps me out. And, at the end of the day, she doesn't have to. She's your wife, and you married her for who she is. And so you need to accept that and don't try to turn her into something that she's not.
So they don't have to play the piano.
They don't have to play the piano. They don't have to sing specials. They don't have to counsel with other ladies if they don't want to. Don't make them.
Look at your mom. Her personality is the polar opposite of me, and she was a successful pastor's wife, but she didn't do a lot of the stuff I do.
Right. Yeah, and my mom too. Yeah, my mom was complete opposite of my wife, but yet she was very loved. She was a blessing in the church, but she had a different kind of role because she was just a different person. She was very quiet and
behind the scenes.
Yeah,
she did everything behind the scenes.
Yeah, she was non-confrontational. Yeah, but she still did a lot of stuff.
Yeah, she did.
But at the same time too, she never spoke for anything. Like at a ladies' gathering or something.
She would have died.
One of the funniest things a few years back, we were at a pastor's fellowship, and my mom was there. We were sitting there eating, and a pastor came up to my mom, and I was sitting there, and Dad wasn't around, but I was sitting next to her, and he asked my mom if she would be willing to come and speak at a ladies' thing that they were having. And I remember just seeing my mom's face, and she just like freaked out, and she just kind of like looked at me like she wanted me to answer for her, because she knew I knew what her answer would be. And I just looked back and I said, go ahead and tell him. And she's just like, and she didn't even want to tell him no.
She doesn't like saying no either.
She did not want to do it. She had no desire, and that's just not who she was. And and this is a pretty well-known, well-respected pastor, and a lot of women would feel honored to speak at this event. And man, she shot it down just like that, because that's just who she is. But she still did a ton of stuff as a pastor's wife, but it was a different role, or a completely different role than from what my wife does. So don't make your wife copy off some other pastor's wife.
No, and women need to realize that too. You don't need to be a copy of someone.
And ladies who attend other churches, don't go putting all these expectations on your pastor's wife. It just don't do that. And who cares what your old pastor's wife did in the church? That was a different lady. She might have wanted to do it, and who knows, she might have hated doing it too. And her husband have a horrible relationship because of it. And I could tell a few stories about some bad marriages, amongst pastors and their wives. And a lot of it is because the pastor was trying to make his wife be somebody that she wasn't.
Yeah. So what are some tips for men that want to prepare? What are some things they need to do? We'll do the men, then the women, and then we'll focus on the family.
To prepare them for the ministry?
What are some early things?
I think doing ministry stuff before pastoring helps,
Yeah.
being involved in another
yeah.
church, being an assistant pastor, that kind of thing gives you a taste for it. You get a lot of experience from that. A lot of guys just have this attitude, I'm going to graduate Bible college, I'm just going to go pastor. I guess you can do that if you want, if somebody's willing to lay hands on you. But, I'd recommend working in a church for a while and putting up with some of the stuff there. And then,
don't you feel like you kind of need that anyways, to kind of prove yourself?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of men kind of that want to be hot shots, and they think like the end goal is just having the pulpit every Sunday. They don't see all the nitty gritty stuff that goes into pastoring. Yeah,
they don't see all the junk. There's a reason that pastor is kind of like crazy and mean sometimes when he's preaching, is because of all the junk that he deals with. Now, when you just act like that right out of the gate, when you haven't put up with anything, you're just a showboat. Okay. But, sometimes they have real things motivating that. And so, actually getting some real ministry experience before you take in the role of a pastor, that would help a lot. But, at the end of the day too, I guess with me, one of the reasons, and maybe everybody's not like this, but I've always been interested in other preachers and ministries. And so my whole life, I was very, privileged being in a pastor's home to be able to sit at, the dinner table with a lot of other pastors and missionaries. And I've always been just giving these guys question after question and just trying to learn, figure out, what they're doing, how they deal with things, listening to their stories. I've been that way my whole life. And you get it. I mean, I've gotten a lot of really good stuff from that helped me a lot, just pieces of advice I'll never forget. I could tell you about just some great nuggets that I have received just from sitting, not from listening to a guy behind a pulpit, just sitting at a table with a guy. And so, you need to do that, get around some other preachers, talk to them, learn from, have your wife get around their wives and find out about all the different kinds of women. My wife, she was always kind of drawn to more of the, the spunky type, you loved like Lonnie Mattingly's wife.
Yeah.
She was,
I loved Julie Fink.
Right. Yeah. People. Yeah. And, a lot of the ones that were more, outspoken,
outgoing, because I identified with that, because there's so many pastors' wives that aren't.
Right.
We're supposed to fit into this like nice little box of just very quiet and subservient and, like your mom. I never felt like you expected me to be that way, but I felt like your dad did sometimes.
Right.
Like he expected me to be just like, didn't he even tell you once, she's nothing like your mom?
Yeah. Well, yeah, when, before we got together, my dad was asking me one time about the type of, he was like so anxious for me to get married.
Yes,
as soon as I graduated high school, he wanted grandkids. And he was like ready for me to get married. And he was like asking me about what kind of woman I wanted. And I started like naming off all these things. And he was like, so basically somebody opposite of your mom. And thinking, I love my mom to death. I've always had a great relationship with my mom, but
she's great.
That's just
a
not
different
what I wanted to
personality.
marry.
Yeah. Just a different personality.
Right.
So yeah, I've always been attracted to that, just because I felt like there was hope that maybe I was okay.
Right. But I think you liked,
was okay.
Seeing pastors' wives like Mrs. Mattingly and stuff. And, you'd see them and think, I want to be that way. I want to do that. But, the thing is, if you'd had the other kind of personality, you'd have probably been more drawn to people like my mom, or
like, I can live with
or like a Miss Ann Parchman,
right?
Somebody like her. And so the thing is, there's a pastor's wife out there, just like all preachers have people that are kind of their role model and people that they look to. There's other wives out there that would fit your wife's personality. And it's not a cookie cutter role.
No, absolutely
at all.
not.
And so don't turn your wife into something that she's not.
What about financially? What can they do to prepare?
Yeah. So financially, if you have any desire to be a pastor, I think this is good advice for anybody, but especially for pastor, is you need to have your finances in order.
And this is true for any Christian too. It's
but,
not just pastors, but especially for.
You need to, if you're going to go start a church, it's a big deal being able to up and move. And you don't need to go running from your debts. I've known pastors that have, when they moved away from their last town, they had warrants out for their arrest.
Yeah.
Because of all their unpaid debts. And I mean, I literally know people like that, just pastors too. And understand, your name's going to be on a lot of different things. And if your credit is horrible, that's going to affect things with the church. It's going to create a great deal of stress for you. And you talk to most church planners, and at least the ones that I've been around, and the biggest stress starting a church is finances, because you're just always broke.
Well, think about it. When we started ours, we started with our family.
Yeah.
We planted our church with our family. We knew no one in this town.
Yeah. And we barely had any money coming in for the church.
We had like $100 tithes.
Yeah. We had like some support coming in, but it was going away fast.
Yeah.
And so I was just working. The job market was horrible during the time. And I had a real tough time finding a job, and man, it was a struggle. And the thing is, when you're struggling financially, that's when you're gonna be more tempted to compromise. Because I'm sorry, don't act like pastors don't struggle when it comes to money stuff. That is one of the number one things the Bible constantly brings up when talking about a pastor or a bishop. Not greedy of filthy lucre. It is a temptation. It is a pastor too. He's often kind of the steward, and he's the steward of the church. He's the overseer. He has access to a lot of things financially, and you don't want to be in a tempting situation, and because I don't know if y'all realize this, there's a lot of financial scandals with pastors. That's a very common thing.
We've heard about a lot.
So, you need to have your finances in order. And if you're somebody that's just in all kinds of debt and you can't pay your bills, do not pastor a church. Because if you're, and you might just think, oh, it's just bad luck. No, if you're bad with your finances too, it's going to be the same way in the church. And I mean, good night. Some of the crooked things, I know of one pastor that he basically scammed a guy in his church into basically cashing out his retirement and giving it to the church so he could be on staff at the church, and the church was going to pay him with his retirement money. Now, why a pastor would ever ask someone to do something like that, I have no idea. That is just so wrong. That was so crooked. And you know what? That church, I don't know the full story of everything, but it died not long after that. I mean, some of the shady stuff that pastors have done financially over the years, I mean, it's no wonder a lot of people just don't trust them. It's horrible.
And that's one thing you did too when we moved here, when we started the church. You, from day one, you had safeguards in place. Because you had seen so many.
Yeah, we had a lot of safeguards in place with the finances from the very beginning. And part of it because, I mean, I did things the way they did at my dad's church, so I already knew how to do all that. I knew, that's just what you're supposed to do. And so that was good.
I asked a question too.
Okay, and then
we always had like two people count the tithe and write down the number. You have so many records from
we never did anything we've never done anything with cash.
No, so everything is traceable.
And then at the same time too, I was never tempted to steal from the church anyway, because
there was nothing to steal.
There was nothing to steal. It was always a struggle to pay the bills for the church too during those early years. But that is a big stress. But thankfully, when we started the church, we had absolutely no debt.
Right.
And we did have a little bit of a nest egg, and it went fast. It went really fast. But you better. But and the thing too with financial stuff, often that's a bigger stress on the woman too, because women are the more security minded ones. Guys, especially pastors, I think we're just kind of naturally optimistic. We're always just expecting that $1 million check to come in the mail or something. But it's a huge burden on the wife.
I would say that's the number one in the last 9 years. That was the number one stress with both our personal, and that was my biggest fear when you went full time. And then you went full time and COVID happened. And I was like, oh, wonderful.
Right. And I decided I wasn't going to, I told the men in our church this, I wasn't going to go full time at the church until the church was definitely good and ready to take me on, because it had been such a struggle in the past, and I just didn't want to have to be, deal with the stress of wondering if we're going to be able to get a paycheck from the church that week. So, we waited till we were good and ready, and thankfully, the Lord's blessed since then.
Nicole asked, do you guys find it weird if the pastor won't be involved in finances?
Well, I think obviously a pastor needs to know what's going on, but I think it's good for the pastor to try to be as hands off as he can, just for accountability. So if like some pastors, they don't ever see hardly anything, they don't touch, and that's fine. They often do that for accountability. I think they need to be paying attention to the numbers and seeing what's coming in, seeing what's going out. And so obviously there does need to be an involvement, but a lot of pastors, when they talk about not ever touching the money and things like that, it's just, they're paying attention to what's coming in and what's going out. That's just more of a reference to, I don't touch it. I don't have access to it. I don't have a key to the safe. I don't have access to the bank account. They do, and they're doing all that because they know a whole bunch of pastors and churches that have been in scandals, and so they're trying to avoid that.
Karen asked, how did we decide on Rock Falls?
Well, we
try to make a long story
short. I'll make a long story short. Basically, we were just kind of looking for a place where there was a need. I wanted to start a church. I wanted to start one in Illinois. I don't know why, but I wanted to start one in Illinois
before COVID. In Pritzker.
And I was just I wanted to go somewhere where there was a need, and
we've always had a heart for Illinois,
right? And my wife had family from Rock Falls, so we were really familiar with this area. And there was we were kind of like right in the middle of a spot where there were no IFB KJV churches. If you go, a half hour to an hour in pretty much any direction from here, there's other good IFB churches, but we are just kind of right in the middle of a spot, in a pretty good sized town, where, for this area where there weren't any churches. So like even the one that was about 45 minutes north and one that was about 30 minutes southeast, those were in pretty small towns too. So, and I consider this a bigger town just because it was like the same as LaSalle, Peru.
Yeah.
Obviously it's not a city or anything, but
people think we literally live in the cornfields, but we don't. This is a decent size. What is it? What's the population? 25,000 or something between the two. Yeah. So it's not this like rinky dink in the middle of the cornfield with one Casey's.
Yeah.
Like you
stop letting Chicago give Illinois a bad rap.
Well, right now, do you really want to say that in the middle of all this?
Well, Chicago's what gave us Pritzker.
Yeah, it is. Chicago's what gives us all of our politicians for the most part. So if we walled off Chicago, Illinois would be a lot better. So, yep. Yeah, Amanda would move here. There's 3 Casey's. I think there's 4 actually. Austin. There's
3
4
in Rock Falls and 1 in Sterling.
Yeah. There's 4 Casey's.
Yeah.
So, okay. So let's see. What about when it comes to pastoring for a man with baggage? If he has baggage in his life, do you think if a man has baggage in his life, that would keep him from being qualified to be a pastor?
Well, if it was baggage like, a previous wife, something that would actually disqualify you from the ministry, then, you're just disqualified. Just don't do it. Do something else.
Right.
Pastoring is not the only thing there is to do. It's not the only way to serve the Lord. But, that some people would say, well, what if he had as another kid from a previous relationship or they were never married? Well, there's a lot of factors in there because one, does he have full custody? And the thing is, you might need to move. You don't want things from your past creating great unnecessary burdens on your church, or just something that's going to stop you from being able to, effectively serve the Lord. If you're still on parole or something like that, from a drug crime or something like that, you might want to wait until, you're done with that. I get it. God can use people that have some baggage, but you do need to be free to be able to, preach what you want and, without just a bunch of restrictions and things, it's just going to create a bunch of stress for you. Because again, you and your family just might not be built for it. It just might not be for you.
Do you remember the pastor that believes that you have to be, when you marry, pure in order to even be qualified to pastor? Do you remember that?
I vaguely. Oh yeah, I do remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do remember that.
So he has super high standards.
Right. Yeah.
When it comes to that.
Yeah. And I mean, hey, if that's all you're going to ordain, that's all you're going to ordain. I know a lot of pastors that didn't meet that qualification.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily see that laid out in the Bible, but I do think, because of the fact too that pastors struggle, it's another thing that happens all the time with immorality with pastors, and I'm not saying they're disqualified if they were ever immoral in their life, but you know what? It is a good test of someone's character if they can remain pure until marriage, especially in this day and age.
Yeah.
If somebody's able to remain pure until marriage, hey, this person has control of themselves. And I'm not saying a guy who didn't have control before he was saved, can never pastor a church, but, like they say with pastors all the time, keep one hand on your wallet and the other hand on your wife, because
that's horrible.
Yeah, it's just a fact. There's a lot of bad dudes out there that are pastoring.
And then Ashley asked, does the previous wife count if it was prior to salvation?
I think so, because again, that's major baggage.
Yeah.
It's often a bad testimony. I mean, think about it today too, in this day and age. So, let's take me, for example. Let's say I had a previous marriage. Well, and if it ended, okay, there was probably some fault on both sides. And let's say it was before I was saved. And then here I am, I'm out there on YouTube, running my mouth about the homos and, preaching hard on things. And then, somebody finds my ex-wife and gets her to start making videos about me and talking about all my really personal problems that I had.
It's true.
From before that, that
could happen.
I don't want to deal with that. And, there's a lot of pastors out there too, who they're pastoring churches, out in the middle of nowhere, and they don't want to have any kind of internet presence because of that very thing. They've got so much baggage from their past. They did so much stuff before they were saved. They're terrified of it getting out and coming back to haunt them and humiliating them. And the thing is, I think they're limiting themselves on what they can do. I think especially today when, half the people and half the churches are closing down and people staying home, and you need to go online, to just not use that, because you're afraid of things like that. It shows that somebody with baggage often isn't going to be effective as somebody who doesn't have it. So again, yes, God forgave you. Yes, God can still use you, but maybe in a different role than being a pastor.
Do you think people are called to be a pastor, or is it a decision?
I think there's, I think there's a call to preach, but at the same time, I can't, biblically prove that, to tell you the truth. I mean, I do think God calls people to things. I feel like he called me to it, but at the end of the day too, when you look at the qualifications for a bishop, a call's not in there. It says if a man desire the office of a bishop. So, I don't make a huge deal about that, even though I do think I was called. It's kind of my personal opinion, but here's the problem with that too. If I made a requirement that you have to have a call on your life, well, anybody can say they got called to preach.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know any pastors. The only pastor I have ever known who has said that they were never called to preach was Larry Brown. But that's because he would tell you his mother prayed when she was pregnant with him that God would make him a preacher. He thinks he got called from the womb.
Okay.
So, I don't know. I don't make a big deal about that. But you hear preach, I believe in the call. You got to have that. You have the call to preach on your life. And then in that same crowd too that believes in the call to preach, they're often the ones that throw out the qualifications
Yeah.
just because you have a call.
Right.
I heard a pastor one time, you know, my dad was talking to him and they were having an argument about divorced preachers.
This. Yeah.
And this preacher's like, you going to tell me that some Jezebel can disqualify a God-called man of ministry? And my dad's like, it's not the Jezebel disqualifying, you know, it's God. You know, he said the husband of one wife, but that's what he kept saying, a God-called man. And I've heard preachers say that from the pulpit a million times. You're going to tell me some long-tongued Jezebel is going to disqualify a man of God that God called. You know, the gifts and callings of God are without repentance, is what they'll quote a verse. They got a magic verse without looking at the context of that verse. But at the same time, I don't. So you can tell me all you want. You got a call. If you're not qualified, I don't believe you.
Yeah.
So nobody can prove the call, you know. And who doesn't feel called to preach when you're at the youth conference?
Yeah.
And the dramatic music's playing, and the preacher just told a bunch of dramatic, scary stories and told you how God's going to kill you if you don't surrender to him. And I mean, I literally know a pastor who he had a desire to go into a certain field. That was what he wanted to do. He was working hard for it. And he told me the reason he didn't do it, he had this great opportunity. I don't want to get specifics because I don't want to give people, I'm not naming names tonight, but he said, I was convinced, you know, the Lord told me if I did that, he'd kill me. Okay, so you're pastoring today because God told you he's going to kill you if you didn't.
That sounds delightful.
Hey, you know what? Who am I to say, to tell everybody what the Holy Spirit tells them? But I thought that's true story. That's a totally true story. And I've always wanted to be in the ministry, and I've always desired, the office of a bishop. So the Lord didn't have to threaten me or anything like that. So
yeah. Okay, moving on to the woman, because we got to get to the family and all the stories about preachers' families. Okay. So what are some things for women whose husbands want to eventually? I know I have a lot of listeners. Their husbands are training under pastors right now to be sent out. Maybe some of them are like evangelists or whatever. So what are some things for ladies? Have thick skin.
Yeah, so have thick skin.
Yeah.
You need to do like Dr. Don Green said to Phil Kidd when he was a young preacher. You need to get divorced.
From public opinion.
From public opinion. Divorce yourself from public opinion. Do not even get interested in just pleasing everybody. Yeah. Right? Just be, before your husband was in the ministry, you were just his wife. After he goes in the ministry, you need to just be his wife.
Yep.
And again, don't worry about the expectations of everybody and the approval of everybody. Just, ignore it. And we live in a world today where, we have social media and people try to influence people through social media, through their passive aggressive posts, through their aggressive posts, or even just, a preaching clip you heard and that, where, because sometimes pastors too, I mean, there are a lot of pastors out there that they're constantly talking about the pastor's wife and the first lady of the church. That's a big thing in the IFB world, for the pastor's wife to be the first lady of the church. No, we don't use that.
Nope.
We don't use that term.
Don't ever use
at our church.
Me. No.
You are, and I mean, they put so much pressure on this, and then they brag about it. And these are the guys too that usually end up turning up, cheating on their wives, and their wife dumps them. And I think that's just pathetic. And so, again,
you've never put that pressure on me.
If you are a woman and your husband has a desire to be a pastor, obviously, try to help where he asks, but, husbands too, try to get your wife involved in areas where she wants to be involved. If she really likes cooking, then, let her have at it at the potlucks and dinners and things like that. If she likes singing or music, get her involved in that, but don't get her involved in stuff she hates. You don't need to do that.
What would be some things
especially when you're, if you were really anxious to get qualified and you made your wife have 6 kids in 5 years, and then you got her like doing everything in church. When she's like got all these little kids hanging all over.
Take it easy on her when she has little kids.
I feel like some of y'all are out there trying to have kids just to get qualified. And we
call number 2.
Yeah, at our church we call the second kid the qualifier.
That's our little inside joke.
And we had our first 2 kids real fast.
Yes, we did.
And it wasn't because we were trying to get qualified or anything. It just happened. But at the same time, and I wouldn't change it. But good night. I mean, I've seen what some guys do to their wives.
We had kids because we wanted kids, not because we were trying to prove anything.
Yeah, the 2-kid thing wasn't a big deal in our world for and so take it easy on your wife. Take that into consideration.
Amanda, that's funny. Celine, I hate the term the first lady of the church. There's no first lady of the church. We're all equal. We're all Christian ladies, just striving to do our best.
I think a good example of I think an accurate illustration of a first, pastor's wife as a first lady compared to like the first lady of the United States is with this president, because he doesn't seem to make her do anything.
No, I don't really notice her in the limelight that much.
Yeah, I mean, that's often, there was a lot of jokes when he became president about her, because like I remember seeing one meme or something where she's like standing there looking nervous after he became president. It's like, I just married him for the money. I wasn't expecting this, and it was like she just kind of got thrown into that. But he doesn't seem like he makes her do much, and I don't think they should have to. Nobody elected her.
That's funny.
They elected him. So
that is hilarious that you say that, Kelly, because anytime we're on vacation and we visit another IFB church, they know we're the pastor's family, or that's what they ask you: pastor's family, missionaries family. They always ask that because you have so many kids. I guess it's one of our trademarks. That's hilarious.
So, and again, I'm all for having a bunch of kids and having them while you're young. I mean, I think that's great. But I do feel sorry for people though, and I sometimes wonder about these husbands when I look at their wife and she looks like she's about to commit suicide or, about to murder her husband or something. It's like, man, she's the weaker vessel. You got to take that into consideration. It's easy for you, not for her.
Well, and that's the thing too. I think back to the man, just regarding his wife, is that he's got to keep that mindset. You've always been very good about that. I think when we were younger, I pushed myself too hard because of my expectations, not so much your expectations on me. I felt like I had to measure up to like the Jack Parchman, like pastor's wife status. You know what I mean? But it wasn't anything you ever put on me.
Yeah, I never pushed it. That was your own thing too, because that like me. I've always just done what I wanted to do.
Yeah, you have.
And I never felt like I had to
measure up to someone.
Yeah, compete with some other pastor or be just like them.
That way.
I learned a long time ago, God made me who I am, and that means that's who I'm supposed to be. So I've never felt like I had to imitate somebody or try to, I think it's okay for us to enjoy what we do. And I've always tried to do that. And if I'm not enjoying what I'm doing, I figure I'm probably doing something wrong.
I think that's why it drives me nuts when people accuse you of the opposite, because I know you. It just absolutely drives me nuts because I know your heart. But what should a woman do to prepare for, okay, let's talk about some of the things that come with being a pastor's wife, and that would be maybe some of the attacks, because there will be attacks against her husband.
Yeah. Well, people, they try to hate you where they think you're vulnerable.
You know me, I get mad.
Right. And a lot of pastors too. I mean, they can take it. In fact, that's one of the most valuable roundtable conversations I had, eating a meal at a youth conference one time. I will not say the name of this preacher because he's hated by a lot of people, but and you'd never guess who it was. But at the same time, one of the things he was talking about as Christians, he started talking about these transitional mats that they shoot, like an indoor target, and they absorb the impact of the bullet, just falls to the ground. He's like, you got to be a transitional Christian as a pastor. You've got to learn to just absorb whatever gets thrown at you and just let it fall off you.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be hitting back all the time, and just because if you're doing something for the Lord, you're going to be getting shot at all the time. And that really registered with me that day. It's always kind of stuck with me, and I think about that a lot. But at the same time, for me growing up, where and even after I was an adult, where I would struggle though was like when people shot at my dad, and they shoot at you where you're vulnerable too. And so some people go after the wife, which I told my wife, when she started this, I was like, you know what, if you can't handle people online saying horrible things about you, don't do it. Because you know what, I can't go out and defend you against all the trolls that want to come on. And you know what, trolls are nasty, and they're gonna try to hit you where they think you're vulnerable. And with women, a lot of times it's appearance stuff where they're sensitive. They're gonna try to talk about your mothering and all that kind of stuff.
It's mainly been appearance with me. I've been called everything.
Right. But yeah, and I was like, and anytime you start bringing some of that stuff up, I was like, well, hey, if you don't like it, you're gonna have to get off the online world, because I just can't go punching trolls in the nose. I don't know who they are. They hide behind a keyboard.
Yeah.
And they're not going to show up at our church. So
some do.
Right. So the thing is, though, you have to learn. You see, what would often hurt me with my dad growing up is because often things would hurt him, and they would hurt him bad, and I would see that, and it would just that would cause a lot of anger. So the thing is, you can't be fake with your kids. You just can't fake it. All right. You can fake your church out, but you can't fake out your family.
Mm-hmm.
And so the thing is, if I'm getting attacked and I'm getting hurt, it's going to hurt my family more than it hurts me. So you know what? I have to be bulletproof. I have to be able to take stuff and not let it bother me. And I'm telling you, I go back to that conversation I had many years ago, and I think about that. I got to absorb that blow and just let it fall off, because if I let it hurt me, it's not just going to hurt me, it's going to hurt my family. And let me tell you, some of these people out there, they're nasty, they're dirty. Okay, the trolls. Okay, nobody cares about the trolls. All right, the trolls that are always attacking us. Okay, in my house, my kids have been like looking at some of that stuff and watching videos people make about me and laughing at them.
We think it's funny.
They laugh at my trolls
because it's so far off most
of
the time.
And it's funny to them. But when it's like your allies, when it's like fellow preachers attacking, things like that, that's the kind of stuff that's more likely to hurt. But if it doesn't hurt me, it'll be much less likely to hurt them. And so, listen, even preachers can get full of the devil. And, that is one of the...
when you went post-trib and started getting passively aggressively named from pulpits, I had a hard time with that, because these were pastors that they knew your character.
Right.
And they knew our character, and they were still attacking.
Mm-hmm.
And that really hurt.
Yeah. And the thing is, preachers can be some of the meanest bunch of snakes that there are. And it's absolutely horrible. And they fight dirty. And they do. They try to hurt your family. They'll even attack families sometimes. They'll try to get at you through your family. Some of the tactics people use, it's amazing.
They try to drive wedges between you and your dad.
Right. Yeah. It's dirty. And, I said, I try to avoid as much of that stuff as possible, because, even if I don't necessarily care for a preacher too much, a lot of times they've got a wife and kids that are just poor victims of.
They're still people at the end of the day.
Right.
They have families and lives, and I try to always keep that in mind. I don't want to attack someone if they're truly saved.
And bitterness amongst pastors' kids is a huge thing. I could start naming some people right now Some that are even pastors. I know some guys that are pastors that were preachers' kids. And I remember as a teenager being around these guys, and they were just always talking about how horrible it was. Like they hated their church. They hated everybody in their church. They were always talking about attacks that were done on them. And then these guys for some reason went into the ministry. And then they had that same they still have that same attitude in the ministry today. They are so negative. They're so down on people. They're always talking about how horrible the people are in their church to them. And it's interesting because it's like, that's interesting. So everybody was horrible to your dad and all the churches he was at. Everybody's horrible to you and all the churches where you're at. I don't know. I get it. There's a lot of bad people that come through churches, but sometimes I think we ask for some of this. I think it's just the outlook. I think it's, so if you focus on, a lot of times you'll have one family in the church attacking you, and it's like all your attention goes to them instead of the 50 families in the church that aren't attacking you.
Right.
And
we've not had that experience at Liberty because I feel like for the most part, I mean, we've had, a couple backstabbers come through that left pretty quickly.
Right. But
only within a few months. But the majority of our people are not like that.
Right. But I also have to be truthful. Okay. One of the reasons it doesn't seem like that is because I don't react to it.
You don't, but I do.
Yeah. So it's just, it's not a big thing when it happens, We've
had more attacks from outside the church than in the church. Though.
Right. But even we don't sit around and just like talk about all the battles and attacks that we're dealing with all the time.
No.
It's just, we've got way more good things. We could, if we wanted to, we could talk about it. There's plenty of stuff out there, just search my name on YouTube and you'll find, plenty of trolls out there that, want to run my name through the mud and stuff.
Hundreds of thousands of views on videos against you.
We could sit around and talk about that stuff. We could read comments. I could go look at Facebook posts and read comments, but it's like I don't spend time doing that.
Look at memes.
Yeah, I've got a lot more going for me than I have going against me, especially within my church. And within the church, within our church, things are very peaceful. Things are great. And I'm not called to pastor the internet. So I'm not going to get too caught up in what's going on in the internet world because that's just going to get me down and have bad attitude. And I'm telling you, these people that I know, these pastors who are preachers' kids, they're just so stinking bitter. It terrifies me to think my kids would ever be like that.
Yeah, I don't want
someday.
That for my kids.
I do not want. I'm not raising victims. And
how do you prevent that from happening as a pastor? What do you not do?
Well, one, I don't make my kids think they're victims.
Right.
My kids are not victims.
Yep.
My kids, they have dealt with some stuff and they have to deal with some things, but they also, there's a lot of good things that they get to do too.
There is. They get a lot of fun things.
Yeah. So
there's a lot of perks.
Right. So, we focus on those things. We talk about those things. And if we deal with, and this is another thing too that I got a hold of before I started the church, because again, I've been around pastors my whole life, and I have heard so many stories of pastors that have gone through church splits and all these different things, and it just tears them up. It always would tear these pastors up when that kind of thing would happen. And so I remember thinking, okay, every pastor I know has had nasty church splits, and they've taken it very personal.
Yeah. Well, it's
okay. Yeah. So it's like, if I have a church split, it's probably not just because of me. I think that just comes with the territory.
It does.
So maybe I shouldn't act like a victim. Maybe I shouldn't let it tear me up.
Yeah.
And I don't see where I'm better than any of these guys. And if some of these pastors, some of the best I have ever known, if they dealt with stuff like that, why wouldn't I deal with stuff like that? And if I can't handle that, then I probably shouldn't be in the ministry.
Yeah.
So, you do not want to, turn your kids into victims. So the thing is, though, I do think if you're going to go in the ministry, especially if your kids are older, you want to prepare them, kind of for what they're in for a little bit. Don't sit them down like, listen, kids, you're going to be attacked. People are going to hate your dad, hate your mom. They're going to say horrible things about you. Little kids aren't really ready for that.
That'll get them excited.
Yeah, I'm trying to, and I never sat my kids down and told them, all right, guys, buckle up. You're in for it. Because
our kids have been in the ministry since they were born.
Right.
So some of the things we did, okay, we never let them become, we've seen a lot of arrogant pastors' kids.
Yeah, we've never let them be hot shots.
Never let them think they were better than what
I
they
was
were.
worried about that too, because the last church we were at, they're not just a preacher's kids, but they're the pastor's grandsons too.
It could have been easy to get caught up.
Them being third generation, in a church where that was respected, and their dad and their granddad are respected. And I hate to say this, but in certain circles, there's what I've always called Baptist royalty.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And let me tell you something about, Baptist royalty. These people are often extremely arrogant and extremely wicked, but they have that last name. They have that recognizable last name, and it goes to their head. And I've talked to many people who've gone to Bible colleges, and they're no names. They're just somebody, they love the Lord. They were on fire for God. And, the pastor told them, go to Bible college. They go to Bible college. And then, and in Bible college, you have a social pecking order and all that. And usually kind of up on the top are the recognizable names.
Yeah.
The recognizable names are kind of there on top. And often
it's a lot like
in that
Eli's
college.
sons.
What's that?
So,
yeah, like Eli's sons.
Yeah, it's a lot like that.
Yeah, and often in those colleges, some of the worst people breaking the most rules are those pastors' kids.
Yeah.
They're often the worst ones. But the thing is, they're always on the tour groups, getting featured around the country. You know why? Because if you have a Bible college and you have this recognizable name that's going to your college, wow, Pastor so-and-so sends their kids to that college.
Mm-hmm.
That makes you look good. So even though that individual is a terrible Christian, and sometimes they're not even the most talented person, they get featured in the tour groups. Their pictures are on the brochures. They're the ones that, get to speak at these things. They're always the highlighted featured ones. And, and the leadership in the college, they don't see all the junk that they're doing in the dorms and the things that they're saying. They don't see the way that they're treating other people. And I'm telling you,
that goes hand in hand too, just kind of the bully.
Yeah.
Like
you talk to anybody that went to a big name Bible college, or even a little name Bible college, where they went at the same time as like prominent preachers' kids, and often they will tell you they were the worst ones in there. And these people went to Bible college because they just loved the Lord. They wanted to serve the Lord. And then they find out, and then these guys too, because they have that recognizable name, okay, they get out of Bible college, decide they're going to go be a missionary. They raise their support in 1 year.
Yeah.
Because they've got that name recognition. And then you got this other guy, he's a no name. He goes through Bible college and he's got to go on deputation for 14 years before he can raise any support, and he finally gets out there under supported. And then he goes and does a great work for the Lord, while the big name, he goes and has his vacation for a couple of years and then is like, I quit, and he comes home and then gets a job on staff at his daddy's church.
Yeah. Sometimes it's better when you have to. Sometimes I think it's good that we had those years of struggle to get to where we are now.
Right.
Because I've seen so many young hotshot guys that go right into the ministry and they're handed a ministry and it goes to their head, and they get lifted up with pride and they don't really have to work for it.
Right. Yes. Pastors' kids do get discounts in Bible college just for being pastors' kids.
Yep.
So why? Well, because of the sacrifices their father makes for being in the ministry. But here's the real reason.
Always go into your Southern voice when you do that.
They all have Southern accents. Here's the real reason pastors' kids get discounts. Because if, I'm probably going to promote the Bible college that my kids are going to at my church. So the thing is, if they, if somebody gets me to put my kids in that Bible college, there's probably going to be other kids from our church that's going to go to that Bible college too. So, it's smart marketing is what it is. And
yeah. So telling some pastor kid stories, we're going to like start losing listeners because all these other shows are starting up now on Monday night. Mm-hmm. We have a couple other shows starting up from other people. Pastors, kids, family. Okay, let's talk about excessive discipline.
Yeah, all right. Listen.
We were talking about the one family.
Now, some people fall for this, all right? Some people fall for this stuff. But here's just kind of a red flag for me, all right? When I see, there's always that, I've known some pastors that are like extremely excessive when it comes to public discipline of their children. Now, when I see that, I see a guy that's just terrified of his kids ruining his image. I see a guy that's trying to pretend he's got this great, wonderful family when he doesn't.
Yeah.
I tell people in our church all the time, home is the training ground. Church is the testing ground. Church is where you go and you see if what you're teaching your kids at home is working, you know, and don't be putting on the big spanking shows in church and stuff. That's just a terrible thing. But I mean, but a lot of times pastors do this because they think of pastors as like the most strict in the world. Because, you know, pastors tend to sometimes get them beat their chest a little bit about how hardcore they are. And you need to be careful as a pastor doing that, because a lot of times you have simpletons in your church that take everything serious and think you actually do that stuff, and then they just go and just beat the daylights out of their kids because they have no idea what they're doing, and it's because they're trying to prove something to everybody else. And I knew this one guy. I mean, he would just, you know, he was a pastor wannabe. Eventually became one. Eventually became a missionary. He used to just, and I shouldn't have enjoyed it, but as a kid, I enjoyed watching him spank his kids. I mean, he had this one kid, he'd pick him up by the arm and just spank him, and the kid would go swinging out, and on his way back, he'd hit him again. He just beat the daylights out of this kid. I thought it was funny, but
because you were a kid.
Yeah, and
I would have been horrified as an adult.
But you know, here's the thing about this guy. So he was so strict. You know, they didn't let their kids do hardly anything. You know, everything was off limits. But long story short, that kid that he used to spank like that is married now to a man.
Yeah.
Full-blown homo. And the thing is, out of all his boys, the homo seems the most manly out of any of them. It's just the most disturbing thing you've ever seen in your life. And I'm telling you, these crazy over-the-top types are always fake. I knew another preacher. I was at a camp meeting years ago. He always like sat right behind us. And his wife looked like she fell off the Ingalls wagon on Little House on the Prairie, bought all her clothes secondhand from Caroline, and her kids all dressed that way too. They had a whole bunch of kids. And this pastor, man, he was just mean to his kids.
Yeah.
He yelled at them and just freak out on if they just flinch in church or anything. And it was just very off-putting. And I just didn't like this dude. He'd sit there in church, and the only time he would ever shout during the preaching is whenever preachers would start talking about women's clothing.
Yes, I remember that.
And he would go nuts. As soon as a preacher get up and start talking about women wearing pants, he'd almost start running laps.
Yeah, he would.
He'd get that excited. But every rest of the time, he just sat there quiet. And I just, you know, I watch this guy, you know, I pay attention to preachers. I notice things. And he just really bothered me. I thought there was something really wrong with this man. Well, fast forward a couple of years, I was actually talking to his pastor, and found out he was going to this pastor in his church. And I asked him, I said, hey, what is that guy's deal? I just flat out asked him. I said, what is that guy's deal? And he proceeded to tell me. And this guy, one of the most harsh, judgmental, he started telling me how he let him preach in church one time. And he just got up and he just ripped on everybody. And he's ripping on women's clothing and talking about, you know, all hardcore about keeping your wife in submission and beating your kids and all that stuff. And it was just super bad, super over the top. And, you know, and he kind of got on the guy for it. The guy got mad and was about, and like left the church because the pastor just couldn't handle his hard preaching. Well, this pastor gets a call a little while later. Turns out Child Services was trying to get a hold, trying to find this guy, trying to locate him. They found out he was going to that church. They want to know where he was, because it turns out he owed all this money on child support for a child he had from a previous relationship. And it's like, why is it the people with all that why is it that people with all the baggage are often just the most harsh, judgmental,
Yep.
unforgiving people. You know, the woman that I saw in the Bible that was forgiven a great debt, she loved much, the Bible says.
Mm-hmm.
But yet you've got people out there that have these terrible pasts, and yet they are just horrible to people. I'm telling you, they're phonies. And this guy, he was a big phony. And listen, you don't prove anything by having a bunch of kids that are just little robots that are just too scared to breathe out loud.
Yeah.
You're not impressing me with that.
You don't have their hearts either.
Right.
What happened to all these kids as they grew up?
Yeah, I don't know. It's been a long time since then, but I guarantee you they're garbage. All right. I guarantee you these kids all turned out bad. I have no doubt about that. They
probably fled the church as soon as they turned 18.
Listen, kids are just made to be happy. You know, you can go to Africa sometimes and find these poor little kids, and you give them a soccer ball, and they're running around having a good time and smiling and laughing. And when you live in America and your kids are just angry, miserable, and just can't have fun, you're a bad parent. And you think you're being a good parent because you're just being strict. Okay? But listen, kids need to play. Kids need to have fun. Kids need to be happy. And you're the kind of person, you're the kind of parent, as soon as your kids are old enough, they're going to be gone. They're going to be out of the house. They're going to be talking about what a horrible life it was. They're not going to have anything to do with Christianity. Christianity is not something that's supposed to make people miserable. You know, being a hardcore independent fundamental Baptist preacher with standards isn't supposed to make life horrible. But yet some people make it horrible. And then you know what? Their kids become the next recovering fundamentalists that are out there wearing their skinny jeans, sitting around talking about how horrible, you know, it was living in their legalistic home. And I'm sorry, but listen, you have to, you need to keep your kids happy. Yeah. You need to keep your wife happy. And if you can't do that, you know, you're not going to do a good job pastoring a church.
Yeah, Daylene, that's kind of what we wanted. She said, this sounds just like making your home a refuge sermon. And that, I think that's the number one thing that's missing with pastors' families that kind of go awry. They don't. It's like their family, they have their family because they know they have to be married with kids. But
well, and a lot of it too is because a lot of preachers, they just don't know how to preach. They don't know the Bible. So you get a lot of preachers, they don't know how to open up the Bible and show you, hey, this is what you're supposed to do. This is how you can actually, you know, inspire your kids, give them the love of the Lord and things like that. And so what they do is they preach with their kids, and they're constantly using them. We never do this in our house.
And you've never done that with us. I will not do that with our kids.
If that ever happens with me, it's an accident. I hope I've never done it. I try to never, you know, just, you know, I mean, if I try to tell a story, it's like a funny story, something inspirational.
Yeah.
But I try not to, when I'm trying to prove what people ought to do, use myself as the example.
Right.
You know, if my kids ever do this, it's automatic spanking. And because you start, I don't want to go out there just proclaiming these things about myself, because then I have to go home and live up to them, you know. And then it's like, I went because I got so-and-so in the church and just won't spank their brat, and I need them to spank their brat. And so I'm up there and I'm like using, you know, I saw them in church, you know, doing something I don't like. And so I'm like, you know, if my kid ever did something like that, I would give them the hardest spanking of their life. And then sure enough, they go do it. Now I got to go give them the hardest spanking of their life. And, you know, maybe they don't really deserve one that hard, but it's like, I can't look like a liar now. And then your kids know if you're doing stuff to just prove a point to everyone else. You know, anything I'm going to do with my kids when it comes to discipline, it's for them. And yeah, and in the IFB world, pastors are they're constantly talking about themselves, constantly talking about their wife. I never do this. I've never watched this. I'll never go there. And it's like, listen, if you're just going to use yourself as a standard, everybody's going to pick you apart like crazy. They're going to watch everything you do, everything your kids do. That's why you use the Bible, because you know what? The Bible can handle the scrutiny.
Right.
You know, hey, that's great if the people, you know, because a lot of people read their Bible just to find their way out of stuff that we tell them that they're supposed to do. But the thing is, if we're preaching the Bible right, then, you know, we've got that as backup. If I'm just preaching me all the time, then everybody's going to constantly be looking for that double standard, you know, looking for that inconsistency. And then I'm going to find myself just feeling like I got to live up to this stuff all the time. And that's a pressure I don't need. That's a pressure my family doesn't need. And so I'm not going to do that. And, but man, when I hear pastors do that, because I was a pastor's kid, and my heart breaks for those kids. Every time I hear it, I'm like, oh, please stop it. Please. You have no idea what you're doing to yourself. You're helping yourself win a stupid argument that you're having with yourself from the pulpit right now, but you're not helping anybody in your church, and you're not helping your family at all.
Well, and then too, on the flip side of that, what was I going to say? To just using, just talking about how bad your kids have it as a preacher's kid.
Right.
So not even just using them as an example of something. And two, don't you feel like some of the ones that I've known that are the most hardcore are often the ones that aren't fully convinced, of their stand, or they're doing exactly what they're preaching about.
Yeah, because a lot of times,
exactly.
When people aren't secure in their beliefs, they often default to the hardcore setting.
Yeah,
and that's why they go too far, because they're just not real sure. They're not convinced in their mind. They don't really know what they're doing. They don't know how strict they're supposed to be. They don't know. They don't know how to judge these things. So it's just whatever the most hardcore position is, that's what they take. And, you definitely don't want to, I don't want to put my kids in a situation where they got to deal with a bunch of junk because I'm insecure and I'm just trying to save face and taking the most hardcore position. They deserve better than that. I need to actually be confident in what I'm doing. And, and even, as a pastor, you don't always know everything. Sometimes you really just don't know. And sometimes you got to pray a lot, and, you got to be careful. You got to seek advice. And
then too, I don't think people remember the verse by what is, the verse better than me. You can say it word for word. Just basically watch how you judge people, because that's how you're going to be judged.
Right. Well, yeah, Matthew 7:1, it says, judge not, that ye be not judged. For with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged. Now, a lot of times people think, well, that's how God's going to judge us. And that's true. You can find other places in the Bible.
I think it applies for on
But I think it applies for on earth too. Yeah. People judge you the way you judge others. So if me as a pastor, I'm just blasting everybody. I'm blasting everything that moves. I've got no mercy. Then people in my church aren't going to have any mercy with me. They're going to judge me the way I'm judging all of them. And they're going to, if I'm judging their kids that way, they're going to judge my kids that way. That's just the way it is. That's just, that's the way everyone is. And so you're setting your family up to get blasted. There's already enough attacks and things you have to deal with being in the ministry. So the last thing I want to do is just go basically training my people to just be the harshest, meanest, most unforgiving judges that there are. My family doesn't need to deal with that. So, I'm going to be loving. I'm going to be gracious with people, and people will show that same thing right back with you.
Why is it that we found, like the guy with the Little House on the Prairie wife, why is it we found that people with the biggest sins, I know, they are so harsh on other people?
Right, because it's a cover. It's a cover. Listen, the people that are out there just slamming everybody, it's like they feel like they have to do that to draw attention away from themselves, because they know if we knew the truth about them, we'd be piling on them. So it's like they've always got to keep you distracted with, other bad people that are out there. So they're always just trying to point out everyone's sins to get you looking away from them, and to show how hardcore they are, so you wouldn't think they'd ever do that. It's a defense mechanism, and these people always show who they really are. And so understand too, this is just something you need. If anybody that's wanting to be in the ministry, just mark it down. Okay. if you've got some kind of terrible baggage, if you got some kind of terrible sin in your life, you will be exposed.
Yeah.
Okay, mark it down. If you have anything in your life that you would just be ruined if it got out, don't go in the ministry. You will be found out. See, parents often get surprised because, a lot of parents know how to get little kids to behave because, that's when it's easiest, right?
When they get to be teenagers.
But here's the problem. Those little kids, they remember everything.
Yes, they do.
And one of these days, they're going to get older and they're going to out you.
Mm-hmm.
They are going to out you. And I know preachers that are perverts right now.
Yep.
And their little kid got older and learned some stuff is really, really bad and told people what their daddy had done and got him in a lot of trouble. And I'm telling you, you will get busted. You will be found out. And just understand, those of you that are out there that are just always ready to just nail everyone, you're the person. I'm like Googling online, find out what you did, because that's just the way people always are.
And the problem is stuff comes up.
I know.
Most of the time.
And then I usually find out.
We know a lot of stuff about people out there right now.
Even the world knows this. The pastors that are out there that just are often the most extreme with stuff, they're always the ones getting busted.
Yeah.
And it's because that, just being hardcore, it's often a defense mechanism. It's a way to try to cover. And, and again, there's plenty of stuff we're supposed to be hardcore over, but it's the people that just take it too far that are over the top, where it just doesn't make sense. When things don't make sense, there's a reason.
When they're adding stuff to the Word of God.
Right.
When they have standards that are far above exceeding God's standards.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. When you're more strict than God,
about. Yeah.
I get suspicious.
Yeah.
I think, why are you doing this? What are you trying to hide? And
exactly, Nori.
Yeah. But
your kids know, and they see all. They know. Yeah. They know if it's your heart's desire to be in the ministry, or if you're just putting a show.
You cannot fake your kids out. You can't do it. And you can fake your church out for a while, but you're not even going to fake them out forever. Eventually, they're going to figure it out too. So just don't even get involved in this if you have stuff like that, because you will be found out. And man, I'm telling you, like I said, perverts. I mean, there was a family we were talking about this afternoon. This family, when I was growing up, they had a bunch of kids, and they were like the model pastor's family.
Yeah.
Everybody was always talking about this family and these kids and just how they were just the best kids and they were always talking about their character. And I was good friends with one of them in particular. And I remember he was my dad was one time just talking about their family and talking about how much he appreciated him. And he was saying all these good things to him. And I remember he looked very bothered. And I hear other people saying good things about his family. And this one, he always looked bothered when he said that. And I just thought, he doesn't like people saying this. He's just humble. Mm-hmm. He was that good of a guy. I'm just like, he can't even handle these compliments. He's just so humble. Well, he actually was, I believe, he proved to be a good and decent guy. Mm-hmm. The thing is, though, the rest of his family, it was not what everybody thought. No. It was not what people thought. And the thing here's the thing, we find out, and this is why I'm careful talking about my kids. And, I hope the best for my kids. I think I've got good kids and everything. But you know what? I'm going to find out how good of a job I did after they leave the house.
Yep.
That's what I'm going to know. And a lot of pastors who have this reputation of just these fantastic kids, they get exposed later when they all leave the house and are all terrible, terrible people that don't serve the Lord. And, we got number 8 coming, man, and I hope we don't lose any of them. I don't want to lose any of them, but, and I'm not saying if somebody loses one or, if we lose 2, but man, when you lose like almost all of them,
we've seen that.
something was wrong
We've
somewhere.
seen both sides. We watch what the ones who raise really good kids that turn out and serve the Lord. We watch what they do.
Yeah, and sometimes
they follow their methods.
You know, sometimes they get out of the house and they marry good and they do good for 3 or 4 years, and then they get involved in sin and things fall apart. You know, that can happen with anybody, but I'm talking about like as soon as just as soon as they're out of the house, like they just couldn't wait to get out of there. Man, you know, I hate seeing that. And so, you know, I don't go around excessively praising my kids, and you know, I don't want people in my church excessively praising our kids either.
We don't want either or. We don't want
I don't want
people
either.
excessively praising them, but we don't want people constantly critiquing them.
Right.
We just want people to let them be kids.
Yeah.
And our kids Kelly she's bad.
Yeah, we're not doing a very good job with Kelly.
That's her personality.
We're worried about her. I just told some younger parents in our church yesterday, you know, that are on their first kid, and I said, don't follow our example with Kelly. It's like by the time you get to the 7th kid, you're just giving up and you don't do anything.
It's part of her personality. She's been like that since she was born.
Oh man, she needs to get saved real bad. But yeah, that's why I don't do well. I don't like necessarily the excessive critique, but or the praise either. I don't fall for it, you know. And
that's another thing. Watch out for flattery if you're going to go into the ministry. The flatterers are the first ones that will stab you in the back.
Yeah, the people who kiss their rear to the top.
Yeah,
they're always bad. I'll always watch out for the rump kissers. I mean, I won't say the name. I mean, but this guy, I mean, his nickname was Butt Kiss, and along with his last name. And I mean, that was his nickname. I mean, this guy was the biggest rump kisser I ever saw in my life, and he had stepped down from his church because he turned out to be a pervert.
And he's now pastoring again.
Yeah, not real happy about that. But so.
And then just be real.
Yeah, I guess if y'all get anything out of this, those of you that are interested in being in the ministry, you're not going to get away with being fake. Please don't try. All right. If you're just not that great and your family's just not that good, you know, just do your best, serve the Lord, be a blessing in your church. But, you know, if you got something that you've got to hide, just don't do it. All right. You will get exposed. Those of you out there too that feel like you gotta flatter and you gotta kiss rear and you gotta constantly be, you know, pointing the finger at all these other people. Your day's coming where you're gonna get exposed. One of these days, we're all gonna find out something about you that's gonna just shock everybody and just embarrass and humiliate you.
We already do know some things. It's just we're not big mouths,
right? And
we don't go spreading it all over the internet.
And it's like if you had any wisdom, if you had any sense at all, if you have history, if you have baggage, you should get in the habit of being very nice to people.
Yeah.
Being very gracious, in fact, just being all the things that God told us to be.
How about trying to be a good Christian?
Yeah. It would do you well to go be a good Christian.
Yeah.
And if you would do that, you would be amazed at what you're able to get away with. That's all. Yeah. But when you're going to get judged the way you judge other people. So just remember that those torches and pitchforks are coming for you one of these days.
Yeah, and then just being real. Just your kids are going to know. Having a solid foundation at home. Keeping your wife and kids priority.
Yeah. You damage your kids the most by being fake and phony.
Yeah.
It's super off-putting to them. And like I said, you can fool your church, but who cares? You know,
who cares if you lose your family?
Yeah, your kids, they see your sorry act that you're putting on every week.
Yeah.
And they're going to be, you're ruining them. Don't do that.
And then let's see, did you have any other stories?
Oh, I got millions of stories.
Millions?
Listen, man, folks.
Now you sound like your dad.
Yeah.
Millions of stories.
I got probably thousands, but I was just thinking about this today too, you know. So I can't even share nicknames because some of these stories are too specific, and I don't want to out these people, even though some of them have been outed and they're out of the ministry. A lot of these people are out of the ministry. I was at a meeting one time. All right, let me just put this out there and just expose how bad preachers are sometimes. I was at a camp meeting. We're sitting there eating lunch, and I remember sitting there with a bunch of preachers, and it was young guys. These are like young guys my age, like in their 20s. And they were literally sitting around talking about love offering, sizes of love offerings that they get from churches. And they were like telling these preachers, hey, you need to try to get to know this pastor.
Oh my
I got
goodness.
invited to preach at his meeting. They gave me $1,000. One guy's like, I got $1,000, and all I did was sang at the conference.
Oh my goodness.
And
what camp meeting was this? I don't remember this.
Can't say online.
Oh.
But I'm just sitting there, I'm thinking, dude, this is terrible. And
that is tacky.
Nobody asked me to go anywhere. Maybe I was just jealous I wasn't getting any $1,000 love offerings. But at the same time,
no, that's tacky.
I was like, dude,
it's like showing their heart.
Bad.
Yeah.
It was so bad. And that one that was talking about getting $1,000 love offering just for going somewhere and singing, he got busted for committing adultery.
I know who you're talking about
with somebody else on staff in the church.
Yep.
Big showboat.
Mm-hmm.
Had a nickname and everything. I always called him because he was such a showboat. Very talented, very charismatic, very loved, but a big, greedy phony. And he got exposed. You're always going to get exposed, okay? Every bad preacher out there is going to get exposed. I think especially, too, if you're involved in a good church, and even if you're saved, I think you're especially going to get exposed. I think the only ones that are going to get away with possibly maybe never getting exposed and never busted are the lost ones, because they get hell.
Mm.
So
you get your punishment here on earth.
Right.
If you're saved.
So if you're unsaved, you might get away with it, but you get to go to hell. Okay. And if you are saved, just mark it down. You will get found out. I hope any pastors listening to this that have any skeletons in their closet they're afraid of getting out, I hope you're breaking out in a cold sweat right now. And just, why don't you start planning your exit right now? Because you will be found out, and it will be humiliating. It will be devastating, and it will be horrible for your family too.
Well, look at the ones that we know that have been found out. Their families fell apart. They're divorced. The guys left. The woman, prison time. I mean,
maybe if you just do the right thing, and just
it just lines up with what happens in the Bible and say people do horrible sins.
If you admit you're a fraud and just bow out gracefully, you might actually salvage your family.
Yeah.
But if you keep this going, you're just going to damage them even more, and your fall is going to be even harder when it comes. Mm-hmm. And so
we've already gone long.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I could tell story after story, and I've been in a lot of preachers' homes, and they've been in our home, been around missionaries my whole life. I got to tell the one final story that was a kind of a good story. Actually.
About the missionaries' kid?
Yeah, about a missionary's kid, right?
Yeah.
And missionaries' kids, man, it's tough for them too. They travel all the time. They have a whole bunch of little kids. They have no routine in their life. Okay, yeah. Their kids are always horrible, and our kids do terrible when we're traveling, when they're out of their routine. So we'll give them a little bit of a break. But we were at eating. I was eating at a table with two different missionaries, and they had their son. The one had his son there, and his son was probably only like 3 or 4 years old. He was pretty young,
maybe 5.
And his son's just sitting there, and he's eating, and he looks across the table to this other missionary that's sitting there, who's rather heavy, and he just looks at him and he just said, "You're really fat." And he didn't say it mean or anything. He just said, "You're really fat." And when he said that, like, the whole table just got silent.
No one knew what to say.
And it was just one of those things. I'm like waiting for the dad to just like lose it on him. And I'll never forget watching the dad. He just sat there like this. His knees kind of bouncing up and down. He just sat there for probably like 20 seconds. Everybody's just silent. He's just like, they have no filter. They have no filter. And it was just like, he was so embarrassed, and the missionary, that was heavy. He just kind of laughed about it. And then I just remember a little bit later seeing that missionary over there talking to his son and just explained to him, you don't say things like that to people. But what a lot of people would have done in that situation?
Freaked out on their son.
They would have just freaked out right there and just made a big scene, making it even more embarrassing for the guy that got told he was fat.
Right.
Because I got to prove I discipline my kids. I got to prove. But, at the same time, as somebody who had, more kids than he did that were older than his, it's like, dude, kids do embarrassing stuff sometimes.
They do. They keep you humble.
It didn't mean he was a bad parent. Yeah, they do. They keep you humble. We've all been humiliated by our kids. Okay. And when you get humiliated by your child, that's not the time to blow up and create a scene. That's the time to calm down and go home and reflect and say, you know what, we need to have a training session.
Yeah, exactly.
and that, because and I remember watching the way he handled that, and I was actually impressed by that, because
that was more impressive than just the dad who blows his top and picks up the kid, runs off with him, spanking him.
Right.
And,
yeah,
that would have been more humiliating.
Right, and then making the kid go back and do a big
apology.
And he did make his son do an apology, but it wasn't dramatic.
Right.
The kid wasn't crying. It was, but I was very impressed with how he handled that situation. And said it, a lot of time has passed since then. It'd be interesting to see how those kids end up turning out with stuff. And, hopefully they don't grow up hating their dad. And, your kids are going to do embarrassing things sometimes. And it's like, some people just can't stand that, because somebody might not, my kid's going to expose me and show that I'm not qualified. Everybody's kids do dumb stuff.
Everyone
sometimes.
knows
every
our
parent,
kids are rotten here in this church.
Everybody, every parent is going to get embarrassed.
Yeah.
And if you get embarrassed, that's not your time to blow your top. That's it. And then take it out on your kid. That's time for you to just reflect. And it's like, all right, we got some work to do.
Okay. So yeah, we're here all day Sunday with a lot of people, with our entire family, and our church people would know if we were trying to fake anything. They see that our kids are kids. But at the same time, we have an almost 19-year-old still in church every time the doors are open. Good kid, not rebellious, obeys us. And so they see all that. You can't fake stuff like that.
Right.
For sure. So, and we've never tried to put a facade on.
Yeah, because I know it's pointless.
It is.
So when you've been around as long as I have,
Nicole said your kids make me feel at home.
Yeah. When you've been around as long as I have, you don't believe, be not deceived, God is not mocked. Whatsoever man soweth, that shall also reap. You don't believe it by faith. You know it.
Seen it.
You know it
over
from
and
experience.
Over and over again.
And just everyone gets exposed that needs to get exposed. So, unless maybe if you're lost, then you might get away with it and go to hell.
What about those that are going around trying to expose good people that have nothing to be exposed about?
They're just drawing attention to themselves. That's all there is to it. They're drawing attention to themselves, and it's just like, hey, we're gonna find out too. Because again, too, it's like the best parents in the world are people who don't have any kids.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, you single punks out there that want to run your mouth about raising kids, we're all gonna find out, how good of a parent you really are one of these days when you have kids.
Not even when they're little. We're going to find how good it's worked when they hit those teenage years.
Right.
That's very defining.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
it's a lot of people can handle kids, they can't handle teens.
When they finally have a will and they want to start making decisions. Yeah.
So, people like me, that's pushing 40, when I hear the young people running their mouth, it literally does not influence me in the slightest.
No.
Because of the fact that I've been around, and I don't even say we'll see. No, I've seen.
Yeah.
And you're going to find out one of these days when your kid hits 13 or 14, 15, and everybody's going to know one of these days, and you just better hope people forget some of your rhetoric that you've used before your kids hit their teenage years, before they become adults, because we're all going to find out, so we're all of our parenting is going to be exposed one of these days. I will be exposed for what I really was as a parent one of these days. And it could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. The truth will be revealed.
Truth always prevails.
The truth is always revealed. And so, I'm not influenced in the slightest by the young mouths. I'm often entertained by them. And if I, and I'm not petty enough and pathetic enough to do this because I don't feel like saving videos for 20 years, but it's like, I just like to screenshot some of these posts or just some of these videos and just save them. And then like 20 years from now, all right, let's see if this guy knew what he was talking about. But the thing is, first off, I'd lose it after 20 years. Second of all, I don't need to wait 20 years. I already know. You're revealing you have no idea what you're doing.
And don't you feel like raising kids has kind of shown us how to have grace the most? Because it's always like you're always learning something new. Right. Something's always popping up new. You think you have it figured out, and then.
Well, and and that's the thing too. I went to a church for 23 years straight. I saw kids be born and get married.
Yeah.
Those same kids get married in our church. And so I saw a lot of parents who did things right. I saw what they did. I've seen a lot of examples of proven parenting.
Yeah.
From the cradle to the wedding altar. I've seen that in many examples. And so,
and not just pastors' families.
These were
good families in the church.
I'm talking families in the church that I watched how they were raised, and so I saw what worked, and I saw what didn't work. And let me, and if we want to start talking about some people, too, and start naming some names, you take a family, like the Canes.
I pretty much did how to be a good church member. Yeah. That was all built around that family.
Those people, you never heard them running their mouth.
Nope.
They never ran their mouth about how they were raising their kids. Nope. They didn't. Those people didn't have to open their mouths to show how good of parents they were and how they were raising their kids, because their actions said it all for them. And and then you had others that ran their mouths, and
their kids
and it was to cover. Because the actions were, they were trying. It's like the noisy people. It's like they're trying to drown out their actions with their loud voice.
Yeah.
Because it's like your actions. You're fighting with yourself. Your failure in life and your actions are so bad and screaming so loud that you're a fraud, that you have to scream loud verbally with your mouth to try to drown that out.
Well, some of them actually did scream all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. For example, I remember one instance where there was a mom literally during service screaming at her child in the bathroom, and I could hear the smacks. I could hear the spankings. Just went on and on. It was like, it was terrible. It was, crazy, over the top. I mean, I could tell a whole bunch of stories there. I'm telling you, all the parents that I saw that spanked the hardest growing up, their kids turned out the worst.
Yeah.
Now, I know the other parents spanked too, but I never saw it. They did things in the privacy of their home.
Right,
they did it when it needed to be done. They didn't put on the production at church showing I spanked my kids, I disciplined my kids, and I mean, I said one's a full-blown homo today.
Yeah.
His dad definitely spanked him. I saw it.
It's not just spanking when it comes to raising kids. That's what I wish people would get. It's the heart of the matter. So for sure. And then one last question. What about when our kids become adults and make their own decisions? Then we parents aren't to blame for their dumb choices.
Yeah. I mean, there comes a point where, they got to make their decision, I mean.
Your kid's not going to do everything at 100%.
That's
a whole other topic, parenting adult kids.
I have a sermon on parenting adults. But understand that, and that sermon was preached from some experience, but not necessarily my experience of parenting adults, because I haven't parented adults. Yeah, I'm starting to.
We have for almost a year now.
Yeah, I'm starting to. But that is, I think, a very important thing. Parenting adults. And I think one of the reasons a lot of parents struggle with it is because often that adult that you send out that's your report card. It really is. That's your report card on your parenting. And a lot of people don't like being faced with the reality of it. People don't like being faced with the reality. The reason that guys hate their mother-in-laws is because they're seeing the future of their wife. You know, it's an older, uglier, meaner, fatter version usually of your wife.
My mom is skinnier than me.
And so, but you're pregnant right now. You got to. But
she's always skinnier.
And
than
so,
me.
you know, people don't like being hit over the head with reality, and so that's why they don't like their mother-in-laws. But at the same time, too, you know, your adult child is often a reflection of what you did. And some parents, rather than admit, you know, we just messed up, what they end up doing is they just kind of take it out on their adult kid, and they're just angry at them and they lash out at them. You know,
and they can't control them
at that
anymore,
point,
so.
You know what? You had your chance. You had your 20, 21 years, or whatever, to where you made them do things, and now you just got to hope it works. At the end of the day, you got to. This is something I keep in my mind when I'm parenting my kids, is that one of these days I won't be able to make them do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's easy to make them do stuff when they're little kids, but one of these days I will not be able to force them to do anything. My son right now, who's 18, if he wanted, he could move out of the house, and I couldn't stop him. You know, he's got a good job where he could provide for himself if he wanted. And, you know, I don't think he should move out right now. I don't think that would be best for him right now, but he could, and I don't want him to. So the thing is, you know, I take those things into consideration when I'm parenting him. And, you know, and I could cream him over the head with the Bible where it says, "For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother." You can't leave. You're not married yet. He can still leave. We live in America. He's 18. He can go change his gender if he wants to. And I'd probably have to help pay for it. You know, you know, so you got to understand that's the world we're living in. And so you got to keep that in mind. Yeah, you can make your kids do whatever you want when they're this little, just with the threat of a spanking. But that you can't always. You're not always going to be able to do that. And
that's what it comes down to, having their heart.
Right.
And yeah, but we're gone really late. It's 8:41. So thanks, guys. We did lose some when the other show started, but we kept a big chunk of it. So thanks for hanging on, and hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, we went long, Shara, because he's long-winded.
Tried. I didn't have an outline until, you know.
I don't even know if we covered everything, but we got a good chunk in. So I think we got some good points in there. So if you guys have questions, comments, leave them down below. Maybe I can have them on again.
I want my southern accent.
Oh, yeah.
I can't think of nothing to say.
You're supposed to do an outro with a southern accent.
Appreciate y'all joining us tonight. Hope you got a blessing from this program. Just keep on following the Lord, and take care of them youngins the Lord gave you. They're a blessing. They ain't always going to be around. One of these days, you're going to blink, and they're going to be grown up. They're going to be out of the house. Y'all are going to wonder what happened. Make sure you take care of that relationship with your wife. Make sure you keep her the priority. One of these days, them kids all going to be gone. You're going to look over your wife and be like, who is this woman? You all was so busy tending after them youngins all them years. You didn't take no time to have a relationship with your wife. Always sign with the kids over your wife. Listen, they're going to leave you one of these days. I'm stuck with this woman for the rest of my life. You better believe when there's a conflict between kids and my wife, I'm signing with my wife every time.
That's right.
And that's some good wisdom. That's good preaching. That's in the Bible.
We've heard that so many times about stuff that's not in the Bible.
That's in there somewhere.
All right. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, it looks like they enjoyed it. Your daughter included. Oh, man.
I was meant to be a Southerner.
No, Southern at heart. All right, guys. We'll see you next week. Bye.